In the vast, sun-scorched expanse of the Timbavati, nature usually follows a strict palette of gold, ochre, and deep shadow. The rhythm of life is dictated by the predictable cycle of the hunt and the relentless heat of the African sun. But occasionally, the wilderness decides to break its own laws, creating something so singular that it feels like a glitch in the fabric of reality. Deep within a remote valley, hidden by a fortress of jagged rocks and ancient acacia trees, a miracle occurred that would change the silence of the savanna forever. A lioness, scarred by years of survival, gave birth to a cub that looked as though it had been carved from the very clouds above. Under the blinding glare of the high noon sun, the cub did not just exist. It seemed to glow. While its siblings were the color of the cured grass, camouflaged and quiet, this new life was a startling, pure white. When it finally opened its eyes, they were not the typical amber of its kind, but a piercing, crystalline ice blue. It was a visual anomaly, a ghost born into a world of color. From the moment it took its first wobbly steps, the cub was an unintentional beacon, a target of light in a landscape that demanded invisibility. For the pride, it was simply a son, a brother, a new mouth to feed. But to the world beyond the valley, it was a trophy worth more than its weight in gold. High above, the silent hum of a Ranger drone captured the first images of the cub. In the control room miles away, Ranger Elena watched the screen with a mixture of awe and profound dread. She had spent a decade protecting these lands, understanding that the greatest threat to beauty is the attention it attracts. She saw the cub's white coat shimmering against the yellow earth, its blue eyes blinking at the camera with a naive curiosity. Elena knew that the footage she was seeing was not just a biological record. It was a death warrant if it ever fell into the wrong hands. In the wild, to be unique is to be vulnerable, and this cub was the rarest thing on the planet. He was a ghost in a world of predators, and Elena realized in that moment that she would have to become his shadow. The peace of the valley was shattered not by a sound, but by a flicker on a computer monitor. Elena's sanctuary was guarded by more than just fences. It was protected by layers of sophisticated encryption and satellite monitoring. However, greed has a way of finding the cracks in any armor. While monitoring the cub's movements, Elena noticed a series of digital anomalies in the server logs. Someone was not just watching the sanctuary. They were harvesting its data. High-tech poachers, funded by international syndicates, had bypassed the outer firewalls. They weren't looking for ivory or rhino horn this time. They were tracking the white shadow. The realization hit Elena like a physical blow when she traced the pingbacks to a satellite relay often used by professional mercenaries. They were no longer tracking the pride's general location. They were narrowing down the coordinates to the exact square meter. The drone footage she had cherished was now a map for the killers. Elena looked out the window of the station toward the distant valley, where the heat shimmer made the horizon dance. Somewhere out there, the white cub was playing with its mother's tail, entirely unaware that a digital eye was fixed upon its back. The poachers were coming, and they weren't coming with old rifles and snares. They were coming with helicopters, night vision optics, and a clinical, cold-blooded efficiency. Time became a luxury Elena no longer possessed. She knew the pride would never survive a direct confrontation with men who viewed a rare life as a commodity. The sanctuary's security was compromised, and the very technology meant to protect the animals had been turned against them. Elena understood that the only way to save the cub was to take him where the satellites couldn't see. She had to move the pride into the blind forest, a dense, ancient grove of leadwood and jackalberry trees where the canopy was so thick it swallowed all light. It was a place the lions avoided, a place of shadows and damp earth, but it was the only fortress left. Elena grabbed her gear, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The hunter had become the hunted, and the race to the shadows had begun. Moving a pride of lions is an act of calculated desperation. Elena ventured out into the searing heat, her vehicle kicking up plumes of red dust that hung in the air like a warning. She found the pride near the watering hole, the white cub a brilliant, dangerous spark of light in the open terrain. The mother, a formidable lioness named Mala, was wary. Lions are creatures of habit and territory. They do not abandon their hunting grounds without reason. Elena had to use a combination of subtle herding and pheromone lures, working with the wind to guide Mala away from the sun-drenched plains and toward the dark fringe of the forest. The transition was jarring. As they reached the edge of the dense woods, the temperature dropped, and the air turned heavy with the scent of rotting leaves and moss. The white cub hesitated at the tree line, its blue eyes wide with uncertainty. In the open savanna, its coat was a beacon, but here, in the dappled, fragmented light of the understory, something miraculous happened. The white fur caught the stray beams of light, breaking them up, making the cub look like nothing more than a patch of lichen or a spray of pale flowers. For the first time since its birth, the cub's rarity worked in its favor. In the deep green gloom, the white shadow finally found a way to disappear. However, the sanctuary's silence was soon broken by the distant, rhythmic thumping of rotor blades. The poachers had arrived. Elena, perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the forest, saw the dark shape of a helicopter cresting the ridge. It was equipped with high-grade thermal imaging, designed to pick up the heat signatures of living beings through the foliage. Elena felt a cold sweat break across her brow. The forest provided visual cover, but to a thermal sensor, a lion's body heat was a bright, glowing ember against the cool earth. She had led them to a hiding place, but she hadn't yet made them invisible. The blind forest was about to become a battlefield of technology and instinct. As night fell, the forest became a labyrinth of ink and silver. The helicopter circled like a vulture, its searchlight occasionally piercing the canopy like a needle. Elena knew she couldn't hide the lion's heat forever, so she decided to give the poachers a different target. She moved away from the pride's hiding spot, her movements silent and practiced. In her pack, she carried a series of thermal jammers, small, high-intensity heat emitters designed to mimic the signature of a large mammal. She began placing them strategically across the opposite side of the valley, creating a trail of ghost lions for the satellite to follow. The air was thick with tension. Elena watched from the brush as the helicopter pivoted, its sensors locking onto the false signals she had planted. The poachers, convinced they had found the pride, began to descend toward a clearing miles away from the cub. Elena held her breath, her hand resting on the hilt of her knife, listening to the cub's soft, rhythmic breathing nearby. Mala, the mother, stood over her white offspring, her body a tense spring of muscle and fur. She didn't understand the technology, but she understood the threat. She bared her teeth at the sky, a silent snarl directed at the metal intruder. The standoff lasted for hours. Elena stayed in the shadows, moving like a phantom to reset her decoys, her eyes never leaving the thermal display on her handheld unit. She saw the poachers land, their flashlights dancing through the brush as they searched for a prize that wasn't there. Every minute she bought was a victory. The high-tech gear that had made the poachers so confident was now their undoing, as they chased shadows through the dark. Elena looked back at the cub, who was now sleeping soundly, tucked against Mala's flank. The white coat, once a target, was now shielded by a wall of human ingenuity and maternal fury. By the time the first gray light of dawn touched the horizon, the poachers were empty-handed and exhausted, their high-tech gamble defeated by a ranger who knew that the forest had secrets no satellite could ever map. By sunrise, the sound of the rotors had faded into the distance, replaced by the triumphant chorus of the savannah's birds. Backed by a ground team Elena had summoned under the cover of the decoys, the poachers were intercepted as they tried to flee the sanctuary. Their equipment was seized, and their digital trails were erased. The valley was quiet once more, but it was a different kind of silence, a protective, vigilant peace. Elena stood at the edge of the blind forest, watching as Mala led her cubs back out into the early light. The white cub emerged, its coat catching the first amber rays, looking more like a legend than a living creature. Elena realized then that the cub's survival was not just a victory of conservation. It was a testament to the burden of rarity. The white shadow would never truly be free to roam without watchfulness. His beauty was a gift from nature, but it was a gift that required a permanent shield. As long as he lived, Elena and her team would be his invisible guardians, a silent human wall standing between his brilliance and the world's greed. The cub let out a small, high-pitched roar, a tiny sound that echoed with the promise of the king he would one day become. He was no longer just an anomaly. He was a symbol of what remains when we refuse to let the rare be extinguished. The ghost of the north would grow, his ice-blue eyes eventually turning to the golden wisdom of adulthood. He would roam the Timbavati as a living myth, a reminder that the most extraordinary things in this world are often the most fragile. Elena watched him disappear into the tall grass, his white form flickering like a spirit until he was gone from view. She knew the poachers might return, and the technology of greed would only evolve. But she also knew that as long as there were those willing to stand in the shadows to protect the light, the miracle of the white lion would endure. The greatest beauty often requires the greatest shield, for in a world that seeks to own the rare, the only true safety is found in the shadows of those who watch. Has the white shadow moved you to think about what we owe to the rarest parts of our world? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe that the wild deserves our protection, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our journey. Every voice helps strengthen the shield.